I received $50 million in compensation for an accident. My daughter wants to use the money to buy a car for her boyfriend. My name is Margaret Whitman, and I never thought money would become the sharpest knife pressed against the fragile bonds of family. I once believed tragedy brings people together, but I learned that sometimes it simply gives them a number to fight over. The accident stole more than flesh and bone from me. It stole time, certainty, and the quiet confidence I once carried as I walked through the world. I was 54 when the truck ran a red light and slammed into my car on a rainy Tuesday morning. I remember the sound before the pain, a metallic scream that bent into silence. I should have died that day. My doctor said it more than once, but instead, I was left with shattered ribs, a fractured spine, and a limp that even years of therapy never erased. The lawsuit stretched endlessly, dragging through courts, delays, denials. Some nights, I wondered if I had the strength to keep fighting, but I did. 4 years later, the call came. The settlement was final. $50 million. The figure sat on the lawyer's lips like a foreign language. It was meant to compensate for what I lost, the career I had to leave behind, the hours I'd never reclaim, the future that was bent and broken. A number as large as that could never stitch bones or restore sleepless nights, but it could at least give me stability. That's what I thought. When I told Emma, my daughter, I expected relief in her eyes. Maybe pride that her mother had fought, endured, and finally won something from a world that had been cruel. Instead, I saw something sharper, brighter, like the quick flare of greed hidden behind a smile too polished to be real. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling as though joy were spilling over. "This changes everything." Her hug was quick, almost businesslike. She didn't ask how I felt, whether the memories of the accident still haunted me at night, or if I was afraid of what came next. She wanted details. When the money would be transferred, whether I had already thought about investments, and what kind of life I could build now. But her questions weren't framed as my life. They were framed as our life. At first, I tried to brush away the unease. She was my only daughter, 24, navigating adulthood in a world that had never been easy. Perhaps it was natural for her to imagine what this kind of wealth could mean for the both of us. But then, I noticed how often Kyle's name slid into the conversation. Kyle, the boyfriend, I never fully trusted. He was charming in the way a conman often is, always a little too polished, a little too rehearsed. His compliments came sugar-coated, his apologies slick with excuses. Every time he shook my hand, I felt the absence of sincerity, the cool calculation of someone measuring what they could gain. Emma spoke of him that night, with stars in her eyes. "Kyle says this is an opportunity, Mom. You could invest in something meaningful. Or, you know, help us start building our future." Her voice lingered on us, in a way that made my stomach tighten. 50 million. I had barely processed the number, and already it was dissolving into possibilities I hadn't even considered. I wanted to pay for my therapies without counting pennies, maybe travel in comfort instead of limping through airports. I dreamed of setting up a scholarship fund in my late husband's name, honoring the man who never lived to see me through recovery. But that night, alone in my quiet house, I replayed Emma's tone. The brightness in her eyes hadn't been for me. It had been for Kyle. I sat in the armchair by the window, the settlement papers spread across my lap, and I whispered to myself, "What have I unleashed?" Money doesn't just solve problems. It multiplies them. I could already feel the air in my home shift, as though invisible fingers were pulling strings I couldn't yet see. And in that darkness, in that silence between the ticks of the clock, I realized the battle for my life hadn't ended with the accident. It had only changed its weapon. The crash had broken my body. The money threatened to break my family, and I wasn't sure which would hurt more. When Emma came to visit the next afternoon, she carried a bouquet of lilies. She never brought flowers before, not for birthdays, not even for Mother's Day. I knew then the blooms weren't for me. They were a costume, an accessory to sweeten her words before they left her lips. She kissed my cheek, her perfume lingering too long in the air. "Mom, I'm so happy for you," she said, placing the flowers on the kitchen counter as if she were staging a performance. I nodded, stirring tea. "It's been a long road." "Yes," she replied quickly, already sliding into the chair across from me, her eyes shining in a way that unsettled me. "But finally, you can. Well, we can live differently now, don't you think?" The word "we" again. Emma never liked being left out of anything. As a child, she sulked if her cousins received gifts, and she didn't. She grew up in a modest home, and though she never went without food or clothes, she always noticed what others had that she lacked. I used to think it was normal, the restlessness of youth. But as I watched her now, I wondered if it was something deeper, sharper, more dangerous. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as though she were sharing a secret. "Kyle and I were talking last night. He said this money could really open doors." "Kyle?" I set my cup down with deliberate care. "This isn't his money, Emma." Her smile flickered, but she recovered quickly. "Of course not, Mom. I just mean he has ideas. He's been researching investments. He says you should diversify, maybe put some into real estate. He even mentioned—" I raised my hand. "Emma." My voice was calm but firm, the way I used to speak when she was a child reaching for the cookie jar before dinner. "I haven't even received the funds yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Her lips tightened, but she pressed on. "I'm only saying, this could change everything for us. You won't have to worry about bills, about the house, about me," I interrupted, finishing her sentence for her. "This money is about me, Emma. It was awarded to compensate for what I lost, not to bankroll dreams Kyle has whispered into your ear." Her face flushed crimson. "That's unfair, is it?" I asked quietly. For a moment, her composure cracked. The daughter I raised, the girl who once cried because a stray cat limped across the street, flashed across her face. But then the mask returned, smooth and practiced. She laughed, a sound too high and brittle. "You're reading too much into this. I just want what's best for you, Mom." But the words rang hollow. Later that evening, as I cleared the vase of lilies from the counter, I caught the faintest whiff of rot beneath their fragrance. Some petals were already browning at the edges, curling inward as if ashamed of their own deceit. I stared at them for a long time, realizing they were a mirror of the moment, pretty on the surface, but already decaying at the root. I tried to sleep that night, but every creak of the house felt like a whisper of betrayal. I thought of Kyle's face, the smug way he shook my hand, as though he were testing the strength of a rope before pulling it tight. It was then I remembered something my lawyer had said. Money this large is never just money. It becomes gravity. People orbit around it, drawn whether you want them to or not. I hadn't understood until now. The next morning, I woke to Emma's text. "Mom, don't be mad. Kyle found this incredible car. It's perfect for him. A once-in-a-lifetime deal. Can we talk?" I stared at the glowing screen, the words blurring as rage welled in my chest. It hadn't even been 48 hours. The lilies still sat in the corner of the kitchen, their scent turning sour, and I thought, what kind of daughter looks at her mother's pain, her broken bones and sleepless nights, and sees nothing but the price tag of a car for her boyfriend? The settlement was supposed to heal me. Instead, it was carving open a new wound, and I wasn't sure yet if I could survive this one. I never trusted Kyle. Not from the very beginning. When Emma first introduced him, she used words like ambitious and driven, but I read something different in his eyes. It was the kind of gaze that measured a room before stepping into it, the way a thief might scan for exits. He smiled too easily, laughed too loudly, and seemed to have an endless supply of stories that always painted him as the clever hero or misunderstood victim. I tried to keep my reservations quiet. Emma was in her early 20s, and I knew too well what it was like to fall for charm wrapped in cheap paper. After my accident, I had prayed she would find stability, someone who could nurture her spirit rather than drain it. Instead, she brought home Kyle, a man whose presence felt like sandpaper against my skin. Still, I bit my tongue. I had already been accused of being too protective, too critical, too unwilling to let her live her own life. But after the settlement news, his shadow began creeping further into my world. It started small, in overheard conversations. One evening, as I made tea in the kitchen, I caught Emma in the living room, phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking in a hushed tone, but I recognized the rhythm of Kyle's name slipping between sentences. "She'll give in, trust me," she whispered. "It's just about timing. Yeah, the car first. It's symbolic, you know. Shows you're part of the future." My hands froze around the kettle, the whistle shrieking louder than the blood rushing in my ears. The car. There it was again, not whispered as a dream, but plotted as a certainty. Emma laughed softly, a conspiratorial sound I hadn't heard since she was a child sneaking cookies behind my back. But now, the laughter wasn't innocent. It was calculated. I stepped back before she noticed me, retreating into the hallway like a thief in my own house. My tea went cold on the counter, forgotten. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The accident had taken away my physical independence, the limp that reminded me every day of vulnerability. Now, I felt another kind of weakness pressing against me, the slow realization that my daughter was being led, perhaps willingly, into betrayal. I wanted to believe Emma was naive, caught up in Kyle's manipulations, too blinded by love to see the strings attached to his words. But another voice in my mind whispered something far more painful. What if she isn't blind at all? What if she sees everything and chooses him anyway? The next week, Kyle came over for dinner. He arrived wearing an expensive jacket I knew he couldn't afford, his cologne thick enough to suffocate the room. He greeted me with exaggerated warmth. "Margaret, you're glowing. Wealth looks good on you." The way he said it, as if money were makeup, made my stomach turn. Emma beamed at him, as though he had just performed a magic trick. She clung to his arm, guiding him to the table I had carefully set. The meal tasted like ashes in my mouth. Throughout dinner, Kyle steered every conversation toward opportunity. 50 million, Margaret, he said, swirling his wine as though he'd earned it himself. That's generational wealth. You could change lives. You could be a visionary. His words were honeyed, but underneath, I heard the clang of chains. Emma chimed in eagerly. Kyle was saying you could invest in this new development project. Or maybe crypto. He knows people, Mom. This could grow into something even bigger. I set my fork down. I don't want bigger. I want peace. The table went silent. Kyle chuckled after a beat, as if I had told a charming joke. Peace is nice, Margaret. But legacy, that's eternal. His hand slid over Emma's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that seemed less about love and more about alliance. I excused myself early, feigning exhaustion, and left them in the living room. From the hallway, I heard their voices drop again into whispers. Emma giggled, then Kyle's low murmur followed, sharp and purposeful. It felt like they were rehearsing lines for a play, one where I was both the audience and the prize. That night, I sat in front of the mirror brushing my hair, the limp in my leg throbbing after the long day. My reflection looked back at me older, wearier, marked by scars that weren't just physical. I whispered aloud, as though to test the truth of the words, "My daughter is planning against me." The silence that followed was heavier than the crash that had broken my bones. I wanted to weep, but no tears came. Instead, a coldness settled into me, like a sheet of glass lowering over my heart. For years I had fought against pain, against doctors who doubted my recovery, against lawyers who stalled justice. I thought the settlement marked the end of battle, but looking into my own eyes that night, I realized it was only the beginning. Because this time, the war wasn't with strangers or systems. It was with my own flesh and blood, and the enemy had a name: Kyle. The request came on a Sunday afternoon. The air was heavy with the smell of rain-soaked earth outside, and I was in the kitchen making soup the kind Emma used to love when she was little. Chicken and wild rice simmered with thyme. She arrived unannounced, her knock sharp and hurried. When I opened the door, Kyle stood just behind her, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. That hand told me everything before a word was spoken. "Mom," Emma said brightly, stepping inside as though the house already belonged to her. "We were just driving by and thought we'd stop in." Driving by. With Kyle. On a Sunday. I almost smiled at the transparency of it. Kyle greeted me with that same salesman's grin, his cologne entering the room before his voice did. "Margaret," he said warmly. "Always a pleasure. Something smells incredible." I nodded politely but said nothing. Emma chattered as she wandered toward the kitchen, trailing her fingers across the backs of chairs like she was surveying merchandise. Kyle followed close behind, and soon the three of us sat around the table, steam rising from bowls I hadn't planned to share. It didn't take long. "Mom," Emma began, spoon clinking nervously against porcelain. "Kyle and I have been talking about the future." I raised an eyebrow. "The future?" "Yes." She smiled, but her eyes flicked toward him for reassurance before she continued. "You know how much he means to me. He's been so supportive, especially while you were going through the trial. He's always been there for me." Kyle placed a hand over hers, squeezing gently, like a stage cue. I sipped my soup slowly, giving no answer. "And now," she pressed on, "we want to take the next step. But to do that, well, we'd need a little help." There it was, the curtain rising on the play they had been rehearsing. Kyle leaned forward, his voice smooth, practiced. "It's nothing unreasonable, Margaret. There's this car, a real investment, not just transportation. Limited edition, rising in value every year. It's the kind of asset that appreciates." I nearly laughed. A car. An appreciating asset. The words tasted absurd. Like vinegar disguised as honey. Emma's cheeks flushed with excitement. "It would mean so much to us, Mom. It's a symbol. A start to our future together." I set my spoon down carefully, my hands steady though my chest thundered. "And how much does this symbol cost?" She hesitated, then rushed the words out as though speed might soften the blow. "About 300,000. The silence that followed was suffocating. The tick of the kitchen clock grew louder, each second a reminder of how far we had fallen from love to transaction. 300,000. For a car. For her boyfriend. Out of money that had been scraped from the wreckage of my body, the broken glass and bent steel of the accident that nearly ended me. I stared at Emma, searching for the daughter I once knew, the girl who held my hand in hospital corridors, who whispered, "Don't give up, Mom," when the pain kept me from walking. But all I saw was a young woman looking at me as though I were a vault. Kyle cleared his throat. "It's really not that much, considering the size of the settlement. You'd hardly notice it." Something in me snapped. "Notice it?" My voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. "Do you think the number in that settlement makes the cost meaningless? Do you know what I notice every morning, Kyle? The limp in my leg. The scar on my side. The sleepless nights, when pain keeps me awake. That money wasn't a lottery ticket. It was blood money." Emma flinched, but Kyle didn't. His smile only tightened. "Margaret," he said smoothly, "I respect what you've been through. Truly. But money like this, it should work. It should move. It should heal," I interrupted. "Not be poured into a shiny car for a boy who doesn't even have the decency to earn it himself." Emma's face hardened, her voice rising. "He's not just a boy, he's my partner. And you're being selfish, Mom. You have more than enough. Why can't you support me in this?" Selfish. The word pierced me like shrapnel. After years of surgeries, therapy, sleepless nights after clawing my way back to some semblance of life, my own daughter called me selfish for refusing to buy her boyfriend a car. I rose from the table, my leg aching as I stood. "Get out," Emma blinked. "What?" "You heard me." My voice was steel. "Get out of my house." Kyle leaned back in his chair, smirking faintly as though he had expected the outburst. But Emma looked stunned, her lips trembling. "Mom," Not another word. I pointed to the door. This conversation is over. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her eyes darted between me and Kyle, as if waiting for him to give the next line. Finally, he rose with infuriating calm, guiding her gently to her feet. "Come on, Emma," he murmured. "We'll try again another time." The casual confidence in his tone chilled me. He believed there would be another chance, another attempt, another crack in my defenses to exploit. When the door finally shut behind them, I sank back into my chair. The soup had gone cold, the lilies in the corner wilting further, their petals drooping like tired lies. I pressed my hands to my face, the tears hot against my palms. I had survived the truck, the surgeries, the courts. But sitting there, I wondered if I could survive my daughter's betrayal. Because this was no longer about a car. It was about loyalty, about love, about a bond that had been twisted until it was unrecognizable. And I realized then, the accident hadn't been the end of my suffering. It had only been the beginning of a different kind. The request might have ended at my kitchen table, but I should have known Emma and Kyle wouldn't let it rest there. A week later, Emma invited me to dinner. She said she wanted to make things right, that maybe we could have a civil conversation. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. A mother clings to hope, even when it slices her hands to ribbons. The restaurant she chose wasn't one I frequented. It was upscale, dimly lit, with crisp linen tablecloths and a piano tinkling softly in the background. Too grand for reconciliation, I thought, but just right for theater. When I arrived, Emma was already seated at a corner table. Kyle sat beside her, not across, their bodies turned toward one another like a united front. The sight made my stomach clench. "Mom!" Emma exclaimed, rising to hug me. Her arms wrapped around me quickly, but there was no warmth in it, only duty. "I'm so glad you came." I nodded, settling into the chair opposite them. My cane leaned against the table leg, a constant reminder of what that money represented. The waiter came and went, taking drink orders, leaving us in a silence thick enough to choke on. Finally, Emma spoke. "Mom, I know things got tense the other day. I didn't mean to upset you. It's just Kyle and I are serious about building a future together." I let her words hang in the air, not rushing to fill the silence. Kyle stepped in, as I knew he would. "What Emma's trying to say," he said smoothly, "is that we're not asking for charity. This car, it's an investment. It would elevate our image, open doors. Appearances matter in business, and with your support, we can make it happen." I studied him carefully. His posture was perfect, his hands gesturing just enough to seem confident without arrogance. It was a performance honed from practice. "An image," I repeated. My voice was quiet, but it sliced through the polished ambiance like broken glass. "Do you think an image will fix the bones crushed in my body? Do you think appearances kept me alive when I couldn't breathe after that crash?" Emma's lips trembled. "Mom, no," I said firmly. "You listen. That money came at a cost you will never understand. Every dollar is stained with the nights I woke up screaming, the mornings I couldn't stand on my own, the surgeries I endured. And you dare to ask me to pour it into a car? For him?" Kyle's smile faltered, but only slightly. "Margaret, with respect, you're letting emotion cloud." "Emotion?" My laugh was bitter. "Do you think emotion didn't keep me alive? Do you think it wasn't emotion that kept me fighting through courtrooms for years when the company tried to deny responsibility? If I had been ruled by numbers alone, I'd have given up long ago." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were real or a tactic. She reached for my hand across the table. "Mom, please. I'm not against you. I just want us to share in this blessing. Don't shut me out." Her words twisted inside me. For a moment, I almost faltered. But then I remembered the phone call I had overheard, the secret laughter, the lilies already rotting in my kitchen. You already shut yourself out, Emma, I whispered. The waiter arrived with plates of steaming food, unaware that he was setting a feast before a family at war. We picked at it half-heartedly, knives clinking against porcelain, words sharper than any blade. At one point, Emma's composure cracked. You don't understand, Mom. Kyle and I, this is our chance. Don't you want me to be happy? Her question hit me like a blow. Happiness. What a fragile, fleeting excuse for betrayal. I set my fork down deliberately. I want you to be safe. I want you to be wise. But most of all, I want you to remember who stood by you when you were helpless. Because if you forget that, happiness won't save you. The words seemed to chill her, but Kyle leaned forward, unshaken. Margaret, you can either see this as selfishness or as vision. One day, you'll thank me for showing Emma what's possible. I met his gaze directly. And one day, Kyle, you'll regret underestimating me. The rest of the meal dragged in strained silence. Emma dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Kyle's jaw flexed in irritation, and I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. When the bill came, Kyle reached for it with a flourish, as though to prove his worth, but his credit card was declined. I watched the waiter's polite mask strain as he explained quietly. Kyle's face flushed crimson, and for the first time, the smooth veneer cracked. I paid the bill myself, sliding my card across with steady hands. But inside, something shifted. I had seen the truth beneath the mask. Kyle's empire was built on sand. As we left the restaurant, rain slicked the streets outside. Emma clutched Kyle's arm, her face pale with humiliation. I walked a few steps behind them, my cane tapping rhythmically against the wet pavement. The city lights blurred in the puddles, fractured reflections of a family breaking apart. And I knew then, this was no longer just a request. It was a battle line drawn. Emma had chosen her side. And whether she realized it or not, so had I. It's funny how quickly secrets lose their grip once they spill beyond closed doors. Whispers move faster than cars. Faster than money, they seep into the air like smoke, curling through neighborhoods, clinging to anyone who breathes them in. After that dinner, I wanted to retreat, to hide in my house and lock the doors against Kyle's smooth voice and Emma's pleading eyes. But whispers don't respect walls. They find you even when you want silence. It began with Mrs. Daniels, my neighbor 2 houses down. She's the kind of woman who always seems to know things before they happen, who's visiting whom, whose car is parked overnight where it shouldn't be, which teenagers are skipping school. She stopped me on the sidewalk one morning as I limped out to fetch the mail. Margaret, she said, lowering her voice as though we were conspirators. I don't mean to intrude, but I heard Emma and that boy talking in their car the other day. They were parked outside our place for nearly half an hour. I forced a polite smile. Yes? Her eyes darted around, as if the flowers in her yard might be listening. They were talking about money. Big money. Something about how, once you loosened up, they'd finally be set. He was bragging, Margaret. Like it was already his. Her words hit me harder than the truck that broke my body. I thanked her and shuffled back home, the envelope of mail trembling in my hand. Inside, I didn't open the letters, bills, advertisements, pointless paper. I just sat in the kitchen staring at the lilies, now fully wilted, their petals shriveled and brown. They looked like the love I thought I could count on from my daughter, once vibrant, now rotting in plain sight. The whispers didn't stop there. At church the following Sunday, a woman from the choir leaned in after the service. I saw Emma and Kyle last night, she murmured. They were at the dealership off Main Street. He was showing her some flashy sports car. They looked so excited, like it was already theirs. I thanked her too, my throat tight, my stomach sinking. The hymns still echoed in my ears, words of grace and forgiveness, but all I felt was anger curling in my chest. By the time I returned home, I had pieced together enough fragments to see the full picture. Emma wasn't just being led astray. She was complicit. She was parading my pain, my compensation, my survival as a down payment on a fantasy. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat in silence, Silence had become my weapon, my shield. If Emma and Kyle thought I was weak, thought I would cave under the weight of their insistence, then I would let them believe it. I would let them talk, let them laugh, let them plan. Because when betrayal blooms in the dark, sometimes the only way to kill it is to shine the harshest light. That night, Emma called. "Mom, you've been so distant," she began, her tone honeyed but strained. "I don't want us to fight. Kyle thinks we should all sit down again, just talk things through." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. "Mom?" she asked nervously. Finally, I spoke. "Emma, do you remember when you were 8 and you wanted that dollhouse for Christmas?" She hesitated, caught off guard. "Yes. You begged me for it. I told you it was too expensive. You cried for days, but I held firm. Do you remember what I told you then?" Her voice was small, like a child again. "That love isn't measured in gifts." "Yes," I said quietly. "And yet here we are, Emma. You're still begging. Only now it's not a dollhouse. It's a car for a man who doesn't deserve you." Her breath caught, and for a moment, I thought I heard shame. But then her tone sharpened. "Kyle isn't just a man. He's my future. If you can't see that, maybe you don't care about me the way I thought you did." The line went dead before I could answer. I sat in the dim light of my living room, my hands trembling, my heart pounding with equal parts sorrow and fury. My daughter had chosen her battlefield, and she was using my love as her weapon. Later that week, more whispers reached me. A cousin called, hesitant, to say Emma had mentioned big plans for when I finally loosened my grip. A friend from the library told me she overheard Kyle boasting at a bar about soon driving, a ride worth more than her mother's house. Each word was a dagger, each whisper confirmation of the betrayal I had hoped was only in my head. But the worst cut came one evening as I walked home from the grocery store. I passed a cafe, and through the window I saw them, Emma and Kyle, heads bent close, laughing. She looked at him with adoration, as though every word he spoke was gospel. He tapped at his phone screen, showing her something, and I caught the gleam in her eyes, the gleam of possession. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were. The car, the plans, the future they thought was already purchased with my pain. I turned away before they could see me, my chest tightening as though the accident had stolen my breath all over again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the halls of my house, my cane tapping against the hardwood floors like a clock counting down. The whispers, the looks, the evidence, it was all undeniable now. Emma wasn't a bystander in this. She was the hand holding the knife, and Kyle was the shadow guiding it. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the window, watching the night press against the glass. In the reflection, I saw my own face older, scarred, tired, but behind my eyes, something else stirred. Resolve. If Emma and Kyle thought I would be silent forever, they were mistaken. Whispers may travel fast, but truth once spoken can roar louder than thunder. And I was ready to roar. After the whispers, after the dinner, after the bruises that weren't visible but carved deep into my chest, I knew I couldn't go on the way I had been. I had spent weeks reacting stunned, hurt, defensive. That had to change. I could no longer be just the mother waiting for her daughter to come back to her senses. No, I had to become something else. A watchman in my own life. Silent, calculating, deliberate. So I started to watch. Not with confrontation, not with accusations. That would only drive Emma further into Kyle's arms. I decided to do what neither of them expected. I played the part of a tired, aging woman, overwhelmed by numbers, too soft to resist. I let Emma believe I was bending. "Maybe you're right," I said to her one afternoon on the phone, my voice purposefully weary. "Maybe I should think about what you and Kyle suggested. It's a lot of money. I can't make sense of it all myself." The relief in her voice nearly broke my heart. "Mom, I knew you'd see reason. Kyle and I just want what's best for you." But I caught the flicker at the end of her sentence. the tremor that betrayed excitement. Not about me, about the money. After that, I pretended to grow curious. I asked Emma about the car, about Kyle's investment ideas. I nodded when she spoke, murmured that I would look into it, even smiled when Kyle explained, again, how appearances could buy opportunity. Meanwhile, I started keeping notes. I wrote everything down: dates, places, overheard comments. I logged every time Emma mentioned the car, every time Kyle slipped in a phrase like long-term vision or your blessing. It wasn't just record keeping, it was armor. If one day the world needed proof of their intent, I would have it. But the more I watched, the more I saw something even darker. It wasn't only greed, it was rehearsal. One evening, when Emma thought I was dozing in the armchair, she and Kyle spoke in the next room. "She's softening," Emma whispered. Kyle chuckled. "Good. Keep pushing. Act patient. Guilt works better than force. She'll cave. She always does." Oh, damn. My breath caught in my throat, but I forced my eyes shut, my chest rising and falling in shallow imitation of sleep. Guilt. They were planning to use guilt. My own daughter, weaponizing my love. That night, lying in bed, I felt something harden inside me. Not bitterness. No, that had been there already. This was something sharper, a blade forged from disappointment and necessity. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Put the settlement into a trust," I told him. "Something airtight. I want it structured, so that no one, not even family, can touch it without my explicit approval." There was a pause on the other end. "Margaret, that's a serious step. Are you sure?" I closed my eyes, picturing Emma's smile, Kyle's hand draped over hers, the way they whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." But I didn't tell Emma. Not yet. I let the days stretch on, watching as she grew bolder. She began dropping hints about dream houses and future children. Kyle came around more often, his charm slicker, his compliments more exaggerated. He spoke as though he were already family, as though the 50 million were a shared inheritance he had earned by proximity. I smiled, nodded, poured tea. Inside, I was steel. At church, I sat in the pews and listened to sermons about forgiveness. I prayed, yes, but not for Emma's request to succeed. I prayed for strength. Strength to keep pretending. Strength to let them show their hands fully. Because one thing I knew for certain: people drunk on greed eventually trip on their own intoxication. And I wanted Emma to trip where everyone could see. One evening, Emma stopped by alone. "Kyle was busy with work," she said, though the faint perfume of his cologne lingered on her coat. She sat on the couch, her eyes wide, voice trembling. "Mom, I don't want to fight with you anymore. I hate when we argue. You know I love you, right?" I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know, sweetheart." Tears welled in her eyes, too perfect, too timed. "Then please, don't make this so hard. This car means the world to Kyle. It's not just about him, it's about us, our future. Don't you want to see me happy?" Ah, there it was. The guilt. I forced a weary smile. "I'll think about it, Emma. I promise." She exhaled, relief washing over her face. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "You won't regret it." But when she left, I didn't feel relief. I felt cold resolve. Because I knew then that my daughter wasn't coming to me as a daughter anymore. She was coming to me as a negotiator, a partner in Kyle's scheme. And I also knew something else. She was going to push me until she thought I had no fight left. And when she believed she had finally won, that would be the moment I revealed everything. Until then, I would remain the silent watchman, observing, recording, waiting. Because sometimes silence is the sharpest blade of all. The breaking point came on an evening that should have been quiet. I was at home, curled in my armchair with a book, the soft tick of the grandfather clock filling the silence. My leg ached from the weather, the way it always did when rain pressed against the horizon. I wanted peace, but peace was the one thing Emma refused to let me have. She arrived without warning. No knock this time, no bouquet of flowers to disguise her intent. Just the slam of the front door and the sharp echo of her heels against the hardwood floor. "Mom," she called, her voice already too high, too tight. "We need to talk." I looked up as she stormed into the living room. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glittering with unshed tears and fury. Behind her, Kyle followed, slower, deliberate, his smile nowhere to be found. "What is it, Emma?" I asked evenly, though my heart quickened. She planted herself in front of me, hands trembling at her sides. "I'm tired of this. Tired of you pretending like you don't hear me, like I'm asking for something unreasonable." I closed my book carefully, setting it on the table. "Unreasonable? $300,000 for a car your boyfriend wants that's not unreasonable to you?" Her voice broke. "It's not about the car. It's about you never trusting me, never supporting me. You think everything I do is wrong, unless it's on your terms." The words struck me harder than the truck that shattered my bones years ago, because buried beneath her anger was a truth I couldn't ignore. Emma wasn't just parroting Kyle's greed. She was voicing her own bitterness, her own resentment that had been simmering long before the settlement. Kyle crossed his arms, leaning casually against the doorway. He didn't need to speak. He was the audience to our destruction, watching with satisfaction as Emma carried out the fight he had been orchestrating for months. "You think this money is all about you," Emma continued, her voice shaking. "But you wouldn't even have it if it weren't for the accident. It's not something you earned, it's luck. And now you hoard it like a dragon, when you could help us, build a life." Her words pierced like daggers, each one sharper than the last. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, forcing my body upright though every muscle protested. "Luck?" My voice cracked like a whip. "You call what happened to me luck? Do you have any idea what it means to have your ribs broken, your spine fractured, your breath stolen from your lungs? To live every day with pain carved into your bones?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't back down. "I'm saying you survived. You could share what came out of it. You could finally do something for me instead of always holding me back." I stared at her, this woman who once clung to my hand in the hospital waiting room, who once whispered that she couldn't lose me. Now she stood before me, accusing me of selfishness, measuring my survival in dollars. "You think I haven't done anything for you?" My voice shook, but not from weakness, from rage. "I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. I put you through college when I could barely pay my own bills. Every breath I took after that accident was for you. And now you stand here, demanding I buy a car for him?" My finger pointed sharply toward Kyle, who smirked, unbothered. Emma's lips trembled, but her anger clung stubbornly. "You'll never understand. You'll never understand what it's like to want something and always feel like you're second best." Second best. The words hung heavy in the air, the confession I had never expected. All those years, all my sacrifices, and still my daughter saw herself as less, unseen, unworthy. I wanted to hold her, to tell her she was never second best, but the venom in her eyes told me it was too late for that. "You're selfish," she spat. "You'd rather rot alone with your money than see me happy." I felt the world tilt, not from dizziness, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. For a long moment, I said nothing. The clock ticked behind us. Steady, relentless. Kyle shifted slightly, his eyes gleaming as though savoring every crack in the bond between mother and daughter. Finally, I spoke. My voice was low, deliberate. "Emma, if you believe my love is measured by what I buy you, then maybe you never knew me at all." Her face crumpled, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she turned sharply toward the door. "Come on, Kyle," she hissed. He followed her out, but not before pausing in the doorway to give me one last look. Not pity, not shame, triumph. The door slammed, rattling the frame. Silence crashed into the house like a wave, heavy and suffocating. I sank back into my chair, my body trembling, my heart aching in places the accident had never touched. My daughter's words echoed in my ears: selfish, dragon, second best. I thought I had known pain, the broken bones, the sleepless nights, the long road to recovery. But this was worse. This was the shattering of something that had no cast, no surgery, no settlement large enough to mend it. For the first time since the accident, I wept until my chest heaved, until my body ached from sobs. I wept not for the money, not for the car, not even for Kyle's manipulation. I wept because I had lost Emma. And yet, as dawn crept through the curtains hours later, I wiped my tears and realized something else. I might have lost the daughter I once knew, but I hadn't lost myself. And I would not allow Kyle or Emma under his spell to turn me into a woman stripped of dignity, stripped of strength. The breaking point wasn't just hers, it was mine. And from here on, I would fight in silence, but with a resolve sharper than steel. The night after Emma's outburst, the house felt heavier than ever before. Her words lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Selfish, dragon, second best. I sat in the quiet living room, staring at the settlement papers still tucked into a folder on the coffee table. $50 million, a number meant to secure my future, to honor my suffering. And yet, to my own daughter, it had become a test of my love. That realization cracked something inside me. Not in the way the accident had cracked my bones. No, this was sharper, cleaner. It was the kind of crack that lets light through. I had been reactive for too long. I had endured whispers, manipulation, accusations. But endurance without action is surrender. And I was done surrendering. So I began to plan. The first step was with my lawyer. I called him early Monday morning, my voice steady though my hands trembled around the phone. Lock it all down, I told him. Every cent. I want a trust so ironclad that even if Emma begged in front of a judge, she couldn't touch it. He hesitated. Margaret, are you sure? This means even she. Yes, I cut in. Especially her. By the end of the week, the trust was established. The funds were secured, structured in a way that ensured they would support me for the rest of my life, with provisions for charity after my death. Emma's name was absent. For the first time since the accident, I felt a strange, fragile peace. But peace wasn't enough, because silence only works until the guilty start believing they've won. And Emma and Kyle, they thought victory was inevitable. So I let them. I played my role carefully. When Emma visited, I softened my tone. Let my shoulders slump. Let weariness hang in my voice. You may be right, I murmured one afternoon, stirring tea. Maybe I've been too stubborn. Maybe I should think about Kyle's ideas. Her eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. Oh, Mom, you'll see, this will make sense. You won't regret it. Hi. But as she spoke, I studied her face the way one studies a stranger, noting the tilt of her smile, the quick dart of her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly, as if caught between guilt and excitement. It broke me to realize how well she had learned deception, not from me, but from him. In private, I gathered my ammunition. Every note I had written, dates, conversations, overheard whispers, I organized into a neat file. I made copies. I printed out texts she had sent, including the one about Kyle finding the perfect car. I even asked a friend from church, who had overheard their dealership visit, to write down what she had seen. It wasn't just protection anymore, it was preparation. I wasn't going to shout, wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to weep. I was going to expose. Because there is nothing more dangerous than a betrayal hidden in the dark, and nothing more powerful than dragging it into the light. One evening, I sat at my desk, staring at the file I had built, the weight of it pressed against my palms, proof of betrayal, proof of greed, proof that my daughter, the child I raised with love, had chosen a man's ambition over her mother's survival. The ache in my chest was unbearable. I wanted to burn the papers, to pretend none of it was real, to rewind time to when Emma was still the little girl who clung to my hand at the zoo, pointing excitedly at the elephants. But you can't go back. You can only go forward. And forward, in this case, meant confrontation. Not just with Emma, with everyone. Family dinners, church gatherings, neighbors, all those who had whispered, all those who had seen fragments of truth. They needed to hear it directly, without manipulation, without performance. Kyle thrived in the shadows. Emma thrived in secrecy. I would strip them of both. The plan formed slowly, carefully. Emma had invited me to another dinner this time at my own house, insisting she would bring the food, that she wanted to start fresh. I knew better. Fresh wasn't what she wanted. She wanted another chance to wear me down. I agreed. But silently, I turned it into the battleground of my choice. I called my sister, asked her to come by. Then a cousin, then two neighbors who had voiced concerns. I invited them all under the guise of a family meal. If Emma and Kyle wanted an audience, I would give them one, just not the audience they expected. The night of the dinner, I prepared the house with precision. The file sat neatly tucked into a drawer, ready to be pulled out. My cane leaned against the chair, my strength steady beneath the weariness I continued to feign. When Emma and Kyle arrived, they were dressed as though for victory. Emma wore a new dress I hadn't seen before, her hair styled to perfection. Kyle's suit was crisp, his watch gleaming, though I suspected, as always, that appearances were worth more to him than reality. "Mom," Emma said brightly, her voice tinged with triumph. "You won't regret tonight." I smiled, my expression unreadable. "I'm sure I won't." As my sister, cousins, and neighbors filtered in, Emma's smile faltered slightly. Kyle masked his surprise with charm, greeting each guest warmly, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. He hadn't planned for this. We sat down together, the table crowded, the air buzzing with unease. Emma reached for my hand across the table, her voice dripping sweetness. "Mom, we've been thinking. It's time we make this official. Kyle and I were ready for you to support us in building our future." The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, my fingers brushing the edge of the drawer where the file waited. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "I've been thinking too, Emma." Her smile widened nervously. And then I leaned forward, letting the words fall with deliberate weight. "I know everything, and I'm ready to show everyone the truth." The room stilled. Emma's face drained of color. Kyle's jaw tightened. My sister's eyes widened. The neighbors exchanged glances. I let the silence stretch, savoring the shift in power, the way control slipped from their hands into mine. And in that moment, I asked myself, and all who watched, how do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? The dinner ended in silence. Emma and Kyle left abruptly, their faces pale, their voices clipped. My guests lingered, whispering questions I only answered with polite smiles. "It'll all make sense soon," I told them. It wasn't time yet. Not fully, but the time was coming. For days after, Emma's calls and texts poured in, first frantic, then angry, then eerily quiet. I didn't respond. I knew she was scrambling, trying to calculate what I knew, how much, who else might have heard. Kyle, I imagined, was pacing, cursing behind closed doors, his careful web unraveling. And I stayed still, because stillness has power. Silence unnerves those who thrive on manipulation. They can't bear not knowing what you'll do next. But I knew. I had already done it. The trust had been finalized weeks earlier. My lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense man named Robert, had gone through every detail with me. "Margaret," he said, tapping the papers, "this structure ensures complete protection. The principal is untouchable during your lifetime. Funds can only be accessed for your living expenses, medical needs, or pre-approved charitable donations. No one, not even family, can override it. Upon your passing, The remainder goes directly to the causes you specified. Emma has no legal claim. Hearing it aloud had been like exhaling after years of suffocation, relief, steady and undeniable. But it was more than financial security. It was armor. It was a declaration. I would not be stripped of dignity by the very people who should have defended me. When Emma finally showed up again, it was a Thursday evening. She didn't knock. The door opened, and she marched inside with Kyle at her side. "Mom," she said sharply, "we need to clear the air." Kyle followed, quieter this time, his confidence muted. His smile was tight, his eyes sharp. I sat in the living room, the trust papers laid out on the coffee table like a chessboard. My cane leaned against the armrest, but my spine was straight, my voice calm. "Then let's clear it," I said. Emma hesitated. "What did you mean the other night? About knowing everything?" I gestured to the papers. "Sit." Reluctantly, they did. For a moment, I simply watched them, my daughter, with her trembling hands, Kyle with his jaw clenched. The silence pressed down until Emma finally broke it. "Mom, please, you're making this harder than it has to be. Kyle and I aren't trying to take from you. We want to be included. We want to build something together." "Vo," Kyle added smoothly. "You'd be proud of what we could accomplish. With your help." I leaned forward, resting my hand on the papers. "Your help," I repeated. Funny, isn't it? How survival money meant to keep me alive, has become your idea of help? Emma flushed, tears welling. "That's not fair." "Fair?" My voice sharpened. "What wasn't fair was watching you whisper in corners, planning with him as though I were some obstacle to overcome. What wasn't fair was hearing my accident called luck. What wasn't fair was realizing my daughter thought my love could be bought with a car." Her tears spilled over, but I didn't soften this time. I couldn't. I pulled the papers forward and tapped them. "Do you know what this is?" Kyle's eyes narrowed. "Some kind of contract?" "It's protection," I said. "A trust. Every cent of that settlement is secured. You can't touch it. Not now, not ever. Not with pleading, not with anger, not with manipulation." The color drained from Emma's face. Kyle leaned back, masking his reaction with a smirk, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. Emma's voice cracked. "Mom, why would you do that? Don't you trust me?" "Trust?" I whispered. "Trust is what I gave you every day of your life. And you threw it away the moment you let him turn my suffering into a bargaining chip." The room went still. Emma covered her face, sobbing. Kyle shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, his mask slipping. "Margaret," he said finally, his voice tighter now. "This isn't necessary. You're overreacting. We only wanted—" "You wanted control," I interrupted. "You wanted to turn my pain into profit. But you miscalculated. You thought I was weak. That love would make me blind. You forgot that I survived something far worse than you." I leaned closer, my voice steady and sharp. "I survived death itself. Do you really think I wouldn't survive you?" Kyle's smirk vanished. For the first time, he looked at me not as prey, but as something dangerous. Emma sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking. "Mom, I just wanted you to be proud of me." The words struck deep, but I held firm. "I was proud of you, Emma. I would have given you the world not in cars or money, but in love, in sacrifice. But pride cannot survive betrayal. It cannot survive greed." "One." I pushed the papers toward them, the trust documents plain and undeniable. "This is final. You can't undo it. If you want a future, you'll have to build it yourself. Not on my pain." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Kyle rose first, jaw tight, fists clenched. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The fury in his eyes said enough. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Emma remained, crumpled in the chair, sobbing quietly. I wanted to reach for her, to cradle her like I used to when nightmares woke her as a child. But I didn't move. Because sometimes love means letting someone face the consequences of their choices. Finally, she rose, wiping her face. Her voice was hoarse. "You'll regret this." And then she left too. The house was silent once more. I leaned back, the paper still before me, my chest rising and falling with exhaustion. For the first time since the settlement, I felt something close to peace. Not because the battle was over, I knew it wasn't, but because the battlefield had shifted. I was no longer the wounded mother, begging for loyalty. I was the survivor, shielded and armed. And from now on, if they wanted war, they'd have to fight me on my terms. The air that week was thick with tension. Emma didn't call. Kyle didn't show his smug smile at my doorstep. For the first time in months, my house was quiet. But I knew it was the kind of silence that comes before a storm, not after. Word traveled, as it always does. Whispers reached me through cousins, through neighbors, even through the choir at church. Emma was furious. Kyle had been seen sulking at a bar, ranting about stubborn old women who didn't know how to make smart decisions. Their anger was growing, and soon it would demand an outlet. So I gave them one. I decided to invite family over. Not just a casual dinner, not just a quiet gathering, but a night where the truth would finally have its stage. I called my sister, Ruth. "Bring the boys. And bring your honesty." I called my cousin Helena. "You know what you heard in town? I need you to repeat it when the time comes." I called Mrs. Daniels, my neighbor. "You remember what you told me about overhearing Emma and Kyle in the car? I'd like you to come by. For dinner." Oh, one by one, I stitched together an audience. Not to humiliate, but to illuminate. Because lies thrive in the dark. When the night came, the house glowed with warm light. The dining table stretched with food I had carefully prepared: roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, bread warm from the oven. I wanted no excuses, no distractions. Let the feast nourish them, but let the truth be the main course. Emma arrived late, Kyle at her side. She wore defiance like armor, her chin high, her steps sharp. Kyle followed like a general entering enemy territory, his smile stretched tight, his eyes calculating. The moment they stepped in, I saw the flicker in their faces, surprise at the number of guests. They hadn't expected a crowd. "Mom," Emma said, her voice sugar-coated but taut, "I thought this was just dinner with you." "It is," I said simply, gesturing to the table. "Dinner with me. And everyone who deserves to hear the truth." The guests shifted uneasily, sensing the undercurrent. Kyle tightened his jaw, but said nothing as we all sat down. At first, the conversation was light. Small talk, polite laughter. But the tension hovered like smoke. I let it linger until the plates were nearly cleared, until glasses were half empty, until the moment felt ripe. Then I set down my fork and folded my hands. "Emma," I began softly. "Kyle, I've stayed silent long enough. Tonight, we end that." Their faces stiffened. "You've been asking me for money," I continued, my voice carrying across the table. "Not for necessities, not for a home, or food, or even for Emma's future. For a car, a luxury, a toy for Kyle." Emma flushed, her eyes darting nervously. "Mom, that's not—" "It is," I cut in. "And it's not just me who knows it. Others have heard your whispers, your plans, your certainty that my suffering, my compensation, was already yours." The room was utterly still. My sister leaned forward, her eyes burning. Mrs. Daniels cleared her throat gently. "I did hear them, Margaret, outside my house. Emma said you'd give in. That it was just a matter of time." Emma's face crumpled. "Mrs. Daniels," but my cousin Helena cut in. "And I saw you both at the dealership," I told Margaret. "You were smiling, laughing, looking at cars like they already had your names on them." Kyle's composure cracked. His smile vanished, his jaw clenching tight as he slammed his hand against the table. This is ridiculous. You're all twisting things. Margaret, this is cruel. Setting people against us like this? I leaned forward, my voice steady, cold. Cruel as asking a mother to buy her daughter's boyfriend a car with money meant to heal broken bones. Cruel as whispering behind my back, planning my downfall, calling my suffering luck. Cruel as betrayal, dressed as love. Emma's tears spilled, her hands trembling. Mom, I didn't mean. You meant every word, I said sharply. And so did he. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out the folder, the file. My notes, the texts, the records. I laid them on the table one by one, like cards in a final hand. This is what I've kept, I told them. Your words, your requests, your laughter, at my expense. The proof of what you tried to do. Gasps rippled across the table. My sister shook her head, murmuring, How could you? Emma. Kyle stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is nonsense. We don't have to sit here and be judged. How? He grabbed Emma's arm, trying to pull her up. But she resisted, her face twisted with shame and fear. Mom, she whispered, broken now. Please, don't do this. I looked at her, my heart aching, my voice trembling, though firm. Emma, I didn't do this. You did. The silence that followed was unbearable. Emma's sobs filled it, raw and jagged. Kyle's face hardened, his eyes cold as stone. Without another word, he yanked free from her and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Emma stayed behind, weeping into her hands as the family looked on. Some with pity, others with anger. I didn't move to comfort her. Not yet. Not this time. Because exposure isn't meant to destroy, it's meant to cleanse. And in that moment, Emma needed to feel the weight of her choices. When the night ended, the guests left quietly, murmuring words of support. You were brave, Margaret. You did the right thing. I nodded, but the weight in my chest remained. Emma lingered by the door, her face pale, her eyes swollen. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. Neither did I said softly. But you made it so. She left without another word. When the house was finally empty, I sank into my chair, my body trembling with exhaustion, my heart torn between sorrow and relief. The truth was out. The masks were gone. And though the cost was heavy, I knew this. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to burn down the lies, no matter who stands in the fire. The morning after the dinner, I woke to a silence so deep it felt unnatural. No texts, no calls, no knocks at the door. The storm had broken, and all that remained was the uneasy calm of its aftermath. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, staring out at the garden. The flowers, wilted from neglect, bent toward the earth. They reminded me of Emma, beautiful once, but now heavy with the weight of choices she could not lift. It didn't take long for the whispers to begin again. Only this time, they weren't about me. They were about Emma. About Kyle. Mrs. Daniels stopped me at the mailbox later that week. Words all over town, Margaret. People are saying Kyle stormed out of your house like a madman. Emma stayed behind, crying in front of everyone. Folks aren't kind when they smell scandal. Her voice softened. I'm sorry it came to this, but maybe it needed to. I thanked her, though my heart twisted. I had wanted truth, yes, but I hadn't wanted Emma dragged through the mud. She was still my daughter, even if she had wounded me deeper than the accident ever could. Within days, the cracks in Emma and Kyle's relationship began to show. I heard it first from Ruth, my sister. She had seen Kyle at a cafe, arguing with Emma. His voice was raised, sharp, dismissive. Emma sat across from him, red-eyed and desperate, but Kyle barely looked at her. He's losing interest now that the money's out of reach, Ruth told me grimly. I don't think it was ever about her. Not really. And she was right. The next week, Emma showed up at my door. Alone. Her face was pale, her mascara smudged, her shoulders slumped as if the world had pressed her flat. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. I let her in, though my chest tightened at the sight of her. We sat in the living room, silence stretching between us like a chasm. Finally, she spoke. Kyle left. He said I was useless to him now. He said I couldn't even get you to do one simple thing. Her words stabbed deep, but not in the way she thought. They hurt because they revealed the truth I had always feared. That my daughter had been nothing but a pawn to him. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought he loved me. I thought we were building a future. I wanted to gather her into my arms, to erase the pain with a mother's embrace, but part of me held back, because love without consequence breeds weakness. Emma, I said softly. He didn't love you. He loved what he thought you could take from me. There. She shook her head violently, as if denial could undo it. No, I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted you to be proud, too. My throat tightened. Emma, I was always proud of you. Until you let him turn my suffering into his dream. You stood by him, even when you knew it was wrong. Her sobs deepened, raw and unguarded. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know how I let it get this far. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter stripped of performance. No bright smiles. No rehearsed lines. Just a broken young woman who had gambled with love and lost everything. I reached for her hand then, squeezing it gently. You can come back from this, Emma. But not by running to another man. Not by begging for shortcuts. You'll have to rebuild yourself. Slowly. Honestly. That's the only way. She nodded weakly, her shoulders trembling. Will you help me? The question tore me in two. I wanted to say yes immediately, to erase her pain, to carry her burden. But I knew if I rescued her too quickly, she would never learn. I'll stand by you, I said carefully. But I won't hand you an escape. You'll have to do the work. You'll have to face what you've done. Her tears slowed, and for the first time, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. In the weeks that followed, the fallout grew heavier. Kyle vanished. Rumors said he left town, chasing new marks, whispering promises to another unsuspecting woman. His absence cut Emma deeply, but also freed her. The grip of his manipulation finally broke. Emma struggled. She moved back into her small apartment, working longer hours, living without the glittering dreams Kyle had painted for her. Sometimes she came by to sit with me in silence. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she tried to help around the house. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The community watched, some with pity, some with judgment. Whispers followed her everywhere about the car, about Kyle, about the night of the dinner, but Emma bore it quietly. I think shame had humbled her in a way I never could. And me? I began to breathe again. Not easily. Not fully. The scars of betrayal don't vanish overnight, but the constant ache in my chest eased with each passing day. My money was safe, yes. But more importantly, my dignity was safe. One evening, Emma and I sat together in the garden. The flowers I had replanted bloomed faintly in the twilight, fragile but resilient. Mom, she whispered, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked at her, my heart heavy. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through, Emma. It's a road. And it's long. She nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. I reached out and brushed her hair back, just as I did when she was little. But roads can be walked, if you're willing. Huh. Her hand found mine, and for the first time in months, the touch felt real. Still, at night, when I lay in bed, I thought of Kyle's face. That smirk, that certainty. The way he underestimated me. He was gone, yes, but I knew men like him always resurfaced. Somewhere, someday, he would try again with someone else. And I prayed not for him, but for the women he would find. That they would have the strength to see through him. That they would not have to learn the way I had. The house is quiet again. For the first time in months, the silence doesn't feel like an enemy pressing against my chest. It feels like mine. Mine to fill with my breath, with the rhythm of my cane tapping across the floor, with the small comforts of tea, books, and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I've come to realize something about silence. It isn't emptiness, it's space. And space is what I needed space to see clearly, to separate love from manipulation, loyalty from greed. The accident took my body and left scars that ache with every change of weather. But what came after the trial, the settlement, the $50 million, it tested something deeper. It tested whether the people I loved most would see me as a person or as a prize. Emma failed that test. And yet, she is still my daughter. After the fallout, after Kyle's disappearance, Emma began drifting back to me. Not with demands this time, not with whispers rehearsed in someone else's voice. She came in silence, with lowered eyes and trembling hands, as if afraid I might slam the door in her face. Sometimes she came only to sit. Sometimes to help me in the garden, pulling weeds with clumsy fingers. Once, she left a bouquet of fresh daisies on the table, no note, no words, just daisies, simple and honest, their petals bright in the morning light. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Some gestures speak louder than apologies. But healing isn't fast. I don't know if the wound she left in me will ever fully close. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight. It's a house you construct brick by brick, knowing it may never be as strong as before. Still, there is something in her eyes now, something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Perhaps even regret. And though I don't embrace it blindly, I let it exist. Because if I've learned anything, it's that redemption is a road you walk alone. No one can carry you to its end. The money sits untouched, shielded by the trust Robert helped me build. I live comfortably, not extravagantly, not wastefully. The funds pay for my therapy, for the quiet trips I sometimes take to the countryside, for small indulgences, like good books and fresh flowers. But I no longer see the money as a gift. It is a reminder that life can change in an instant, that survival always has a price, and that greed can creep into even the closest hearts. Sometimes, late at night, I open the folder again, not to reread the notes or the evidence, but to remind myself of the strength it took to gather them. To remind myself that I am not the helpless woman Kyle believed he could manipulate. I am not the broken mother Emma thought she could guilt. I am Margaret Whitman. And I survived. The garden has become my sanctuary. I tend it daily, slowly, with care. Each bloom feels like proof that beauty can rise again from soil that has been trampled. Emma joins me sometimes. She kneels beside me, her hands dirty, her face quiet. We don't talk about Kyle. We don't talk about the car, or the betrayal, or the night I laid bare the truth. Those wounds are still too raw. Instead, we talk about the flowers, about the weather, about small things. And maybe, in those small things, we are finding a new way to begin. I don't know if I will ever trust her fully again. But perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps the point is to love her anyway, not as the perfect daughter I once imagined, but as the flawed woman she is, struggling to find her way back. Sometimes, when I sit alone in the evenings, I think of Kyle. I imagine him in some other town, wearing the same smirk, whispering the same promises to another girl who doesn't yet know the cost. I don't hate him. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight in my life. Instead, I pity him. Because men like Kyle believe money is everything. They think wealth buys love, respect, even identity. But wealth without integrity is a hollow shell. And sooner or later, hollow shells collapse. He'll learn that one day. Not from me. Life itself will teach him. As for me, I choose something else. I choose dignity. I choose boundaries. I choose the quiet victory of standing tall in the ruins of what others tried to take. The accident may have scarred my body, but it did not break me. Betrayal may have pierced my heart, but it did not end me. I am still here. I am still Margaret, and I am stronger now than I ever was before. So here I sit, as the evening sun dips low, bathing my garden in gold. The air smells of earth and blossoms. My cane rests beside me, my teacup warm in my hand. This is victory. Not loud, not cruel, not triumphant. Quiet, steady. Mine. And if my story means anything, let it be this. Money cannot buy loyalty. Cars and gifts cannot buy love. But betrayal will always reveal itself, and when it does, you must decide who you are without the masks, without the lies. I chose strength, and I hope, one day, Emma will choose the same. Perhaps you've lived something like this yourself. Perhaps not with millions, not with lawsuits or luxury cars, but with betrayal. With someone you loved who saw you not as family, but as opportunity. With whispers behind closed doors, with pressure dressed as love. If so, then you know. The real victory isn't revenge. It isn't humiliation. It is drawing a line, saying no more, and standing so firmly that no one can move you again. That is my story. That is my truth. And now I leave you with a question. When betrayal comes knocking at your door, when love twists into greed, when silence becomes your only weapon, what would you do? Would you forgive? Or would you fight? If you were in my situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth for more stories like this, because someone out there might need to hear it.